we take that raw data, as I told you, and turn that into a story. And the story we would use for this one would be NIOSH lifting equation. And what you would see is we actually rank the 5 lifts that this person's doing. And so we can very quickly see it's the first 2 lifts that are the biggest challenge. And why is that? You can see the origin is always the same, but the destination actually is getting higher. So he's bending over less as it gets higher.
Welcome to Manufacturing Insiders. Today I have an esteemed guest, Shane Larson, with me. He has a long history in the investment banking industry. He's worked for Berkshire Hathaway. He is the CEO currently of Inseer, which is it's an AI company that is really revolutionizing the way industrial companies look at things like posture and things that have an effect on people's well-being. Workers' comp claims and things of that nature. It's really fascinating what they've done with AI. So I'm really excited to pick Shane's brain today and find out a little bit more. Thanks for joining, Shane.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Nate. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your history. Like, you have a very interesting kind of track record that led you to an AI company. So I'm interested to hear how that took place.
Yeah. Prior to joining, so I joined Inseer 2.5 years ago. Prior to that, I was at Berkshire Hathaway doing large-scale M&A transactions. I was also doing tax equity work where we were investing in development projects for renewable energy. And then prior to that, I spent 19 years on Wall Street working in restructuring and taking companies public and high-yield deals, things of that nature. And so, And before that, I was a farmer. I've always been a farmer. I grew up in Iowa on a farm. And
really?
Ultimately, that's what ended up taking me out to Wall Street and then bringing me back to the Des Moines, Iowa area.
How did farming take you to Wall Street?
Well, when I was young, all I did was work and work and work. And so when it comes to either baling hay or detasseling, or we actually had show horses. And so what I learned as a kid is that that's a lot of hard work, and I wanted to find a different way. And so I obviously went off to college and decided, let's try something in finance. And so ultimately, that's what took me out to Wall Street. I started off doing metals and mining, so think of that as a commodities oriented business, where again, being around farming, you were always surrounded by commodities.
Right. Yeah, and selling commodities. So that's interesting. Actually, that was kind of what I expected you to say, because the other side of it is a little bit more unexpected, is like, how does farming take you into investing? But yeah, it's kind of the way out of it, right? So that's cool. But the work ethic is translatable, certainly. That's a tough life. Does your family still do that?
Well, yes, I finally stepped away from farming 2 years ago. So I've got a younger, more ambitious brother who wanted to double the size of the farm business. We farmed 1,200 acres of corn and beans. And when I actually left Wall Street to come back to Iowa, we had started a hops business. So, effectively taking advantage of the secular trend in craft brewing.
Right.
And so that's what I actually did when I moved back from New York City for 3 years before I then went on to Berkshire Hathaway. So it was a calling to come back, and then I quickly got a reminder that there's reasons why I left and decided to go back to business, if you will.
I see. One thing that you probably took away from farming was the physical toll that repetitive motion has on your body. Yes.
Yep. So lots of, your back's always hurting. And I think as you get older, this becomes more prominent too, which is, whether it's lower back pain or shoulder injuries, everything you do on the farm is an awkward position and some repetitive tasks. So it is interesting that how things kind of come full circle. Things that, the things I'm focused on today, which is preventing injuries, kind of materialized out of doing some of this hard work.
Right.
hard labor as a kid.
Right, right. So I don't know if you were prepared for this. I think we talked about it in the pre-interview, but I was hoping at some point you could give us a look at the dashboard that you showed me.
Yeah.
Because I think it's the best way to illustrate exactly what you guys are doing. But I mean, I think it's really cool what you're doing too, from the standpoint of you're utilizing existing technology to be able to analyze, workplace motions and, the way that people are producing parts or moving parts and analyzing their bodies kind of in real time.
Entire screen. Okay. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
just
entire.
loaded.
Yep, yep.
All right. Perfect. There you go.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah. So if we kind of pick up where we were, maybe let me describe what we do, right? We have effectively converted your iPhone, any phone actually, to a motion capture facility.
Yep.
And we simply so the point is there's no special equipment. You just take a video and we're going to use computer vision and AI to convert your body movement to math. And when we do that, we're going to take that raw data and we're going to try to tell a story. And those stories are told with academically supported ergonomic assessment tools, which allow us to A, give a risk score, but B, give us what the root cause analysis is. And again, the point of all of this is to find a way to come up with a solution. So right away from our system here, let me just go down to the waveform so you can see this in real time, again, we've got a video, and that color-coded skeleton overlay is showing you where the challenges are, which is the back. And if we come over here to our waveforms, what you would see is this short little 45-second video is 56% of the time we're exceeding a 45-degree threshold. Again, we know that is a threshold that's supported by ergonomics where we want to focus. And there's lots of other data that we're collecting, like speed and calculating torque. We take that raw data, as I told you, and turn that into a story. And the story we would use for this one would be NIOSH lifting equation. And what you would see is we actually rank the 5 lifts that this person's doing. And so we can very quickly see it's the first 2 lifts that are the biggest challenge. And why is that? You can see the origin is always the same, but the destination actually is getting higher. So he's bending over less as it gets higher. He's also, the last 3 lifts are lower weight. But if we were to drill down into each one of those, what you would find is on this first lift, we're lifting something that's 42 pounds. And given the metrics on how he's moving it, it should be closer to 17 pounds. And the primary reason for that is due to the horizontal hand location. And so effectively, it's the distance, both vertically and horizontally, that he's traveling with the item that make a difference. And so, again, what we can see that very quickly from the system, and then it's, well, what would be the potential solution? And so we would go through our system and just click on potential solutions, where what we're going to tell you is raise that workstation height by 35 to 37 inches.
Right. Yeah. Put it on top of a couple pallets.
Yep. That's a very simple, at least the origin, you would stick under 3 or 4 pallets. That would bring that top up. And the CapEx to do that is relatively inexpensive, right? So
Right. Yeah. And just if you're listening to this and not actually seeing the video, there's actually a video where it's showing in real time, a worker lifting metal parts from the ground and moving them to another location. And you can see when he's bending down, it's showing kind of a red line on his back. And then when he's, placing the part, it's also doing that. Whereas if that was raised up, you wouldn't have that same issue. And also probably his form, I believe, could be corrected as well.
Yep. So another thing we use this for is you think about, so I actually used to work at UPS when I was trying to put myself through college and, in the loading and unloading. And so, whenever safety would come up to you, part of the first thing you would typically say is, don't try to tell me how to do my job.
Right.
Right. And as soon as somebody left, you'd go right back to doing it the way you felt most comfortable. the advantage of the system is that we can show the analytics to the person in the
Mm-hmm.
field. And so the second somebody sees that, they're like, you know what? Maybe this guy does know what he's talking about. And now I
Mm-hmm.
understand a little bit better what he is trying to convey to me.
Right.
It simply leaves an impression.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so
It's taking out of the world of conceptual to the world of physical and tangible.
that's right. That's right. So it's how do we make that psychological impact for somebody to remember, and not just remember, but want to take that new action.
Right.
The other way we use this is, again, in the field, when we've got to go document to plant managers that we want to make a change. Again, same situation as I was just showing you with somebody bending over. Plant manager might come in and say, well, simply take a knee. And so we could show in our system how taking a knee does temporarily solve an issue with the back, but it creates knee issues with the knees. And again, if we were to plug that into a story, uh, maybe you pick something like Reba, what you would find is it's not actually solving the solution. So the solution again is raise that workstation height by 35 to 37 inches. These
Hmm.
solutions get much, much more complex. If I use an example where we've got an automotive supplier, and the common example I use is they're putting a radiator hose on the line, and we can actually measure the torque about the joints. And if we see it to be excessive, what we can do is pay a supplier, 1 or 2 pennies to lubricate the inside of that radiator hose so that it slides right on, dramatically reducing the torque
Interesting.
about the joint.
Interesting. Yeah, and these are all, it's very possible that a lot of these things too are going to, just cause more efficiency in the workplace. Even workers' comp claims aside, or missed time due to back injuries, something like that. The worker's no longer struggling with shoving that hose on. He's going to be able to shove more hoses on in a shorter amount of time too.
Yeah, and the goal is to keep him from going to keep him out of the chiropractor's office, keep him out of physical therapy,
Right.
do it right the first time, so that again, as the population ages, these things aren't cumulative and catching up to you.
Right. Right. So, how accessible is Inseer to a safety conscious manufacturer who really wants to kind of get in front of some of the risks to their employees?
Yep. The the first thing that we typically do is we ask, what are your biggest challenges, and where are you seeing the most incidents? Give us those big problems. Let us come in and show you how we can resolve them. And again, we don't view that just this is software, but it's not software in a box. And so we want to be out there helping them. So we have trained ergonomists on staff that either work with your ergonomist or with safety professionals, because safety professionals are going to be more generalists. They're not going to have expertise in ergonomics. And so we want to support them in those efforts.
Right, right. So is that kind of the go to market? Is it straight to the manufacturer, or is it straight to kind of a safety group? How are you kind of focusing things?
Yeah, great question. Our end customer is typically the ergonomist first, who then takes it up through their safety channels or occupational medical group. And then once they get budget, they're kind of the product champions. And so it really, again, the ergonomist being very niche
Yeah.
is somebody that works within those broader groups typically.
Okay. Yeah, because that seems very niche. I mean, it seems to me like a very limited perspective market. If that's the entry point. So I guess why not just take? I mean, because if you go from ergonomist to chief safety officer, you go from a pool of, I don't know. I don't know how many ergonomists there are, but I haven't heard of many of them. So let's say 2,000 of them nationwide to 500,000 nationwide.
Yeah, it is a small pool, small niche. You're right. And so our goal is always build the tool that's technical for those ergonomists, but also something that's easy to use and understand for the generalists, so
Right.
that you do open up that market. And and with larger enterprise customers, the ergonomist is involved typically at the engineering stage. And so they're working with the engineers that are developing the next, auto line. They're working the
Mm,
next product. How am I putting an engine part in so that somebody that's servicing that can actually get their hand up there and a wrench up there to fix it in the future?
right. Right. So they're very early stage. So like when you're talking about new facilities, new production lines, things like that. Um, I would assume that the bigger play is the existing manufacturers, the existing people that have a 50-year-old line that are obviously, having some issues with employee injuries.
Yeah, I think most of the tools utilized for post facto, meaning the lines are typically already built. I'm out there trying to I see incidents, right? So an
Mhm.
ergonomist literally can walk the floor and they'll be able to easily see where the incidents or challenges are. It's a question of how do I document that and how do I communicate those up to my management team in order to, in some cases, spend money to re engineer things.
Mhm.
And so, again, that's where we're seeing most of the product being used now. And again, it is being used on the engineering side, but in a little more limited scale today.
I see. So when you came into this company, it was still pretty fresh and pretty new, right?
Yeah, this whole concept was born out of the University of Iowa, PhDs and MDs that had spent 4 years developing the underlying technology of computer vision, and the AI models that go with it. And those AI models, as I tell people, the real value in that is the annotated data sets, where what we've done is built models that are supposed to be good for lots and lots of edge cases. Because what you find in manufacturing is every single opportunity is an edge case. Nothing seems to be the same.
Hmm. Right. So did you kind of put your focus on the AI development when you first came into the company? I'm just interested to kind of hear how your previous experience in really investing, translated to this, and kind of how it influenced how you approached it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought me back to that. It's The company has always been focused on being the best at accuracy, and so it's what you don't see. It's that when you're taking a video, that skeleton overlay is providing the most accurate information, the raw data that then is feeding into the stories. We had done some really really good work prior to my arrival, and we have since then leapfrogged what had been done, and it's significantly better. Um, and that's just, again, new models, new approaches, hand models, things of that nature. Um, but I think more importantly, what has really given us the traction is we started spending a lot of time with our customers asking, what do you need to see? We were slow out of the gate in terms of getting traction. And so spending time with, these small and large customers trying to figure out where's the value. And so what we ended up doing was building the academically supported assessment tools on top of the underlying technology, because that's what the ergonomists or safety teams were used to using, right?
Right.
And so it's kind of a story of, you've got to be careful if you are a new technology. Sometimes the adoption curve on that uh, can be lengthy. So you've
Right.
got to have some of that old technology built in there, because that's the way people are used to seeing it. But we use the new technology to effectively auto populate that. And so think of it as, um, what are we ultimately doing? We're dramatically increasing the productivity of the ergonomist or of the safety team. So what used to take them hours to do now takes them minutes. Second, the consistency of the information is objective. So the computer is seeing the math and telling you where the most challenging points are versus the subjectivity of the human picking where those points are. And
Right.
so management teams feel much, much more at ease with the fact that the information that's coming to them is consistent
Mhm.
and right and objective.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, because I can see, a professional in this space without the use of a technical tool like this, they may have a little obsession with back issues or knee issues or whatever, and be a little bit too hyper focused on that, where they aren't seeing the whole picture.
Yep. Yep.
So how does it work? So let's say you have, I don't know, it looks like the guy there was working maybe in a machine shop. So you have a large machine shop. Uh, when you go into a place like this, how do you identify how many different workstations you're gonna, get a video recording? How many workers do you? How long does it take? Like, how does it work?
Yeah. No, it's good question because what you had seen was exactly that. It was a machine shop where maybe for 10 minutes they're going to do something and then the next 10 minutes they're doing something else. So it's maybe the better analogy is like construction where, again, you're doing something for small pockets of time. And so what you would do is you would come in and you're going to choose some of the most challenging tasks. And so again, those videos are built on task analysis. And then ultimately what we do is we try to go back and look at all those tasks to figure out which ones are the highest priority that we want to focus on. Maybe we can't focus on all of them at once. Let's figure out what the most challenging ones are. Let's try to get those, put behind us. So again,
Right.
when I showed you bending over, wow, that's real simple. Can we bring in sawhorses? Can we, as you saw, stack things on pallets?
Right.
It gets more complex over time because you've got to, we had a situation with a manufacturing company where in the logistics department, all the product would come in on rollers on the floor. So somebody would bend down, pick that up, walk it over to the pallet for the proper distribution center, bend over and put it into that pallet. And again, that was happening all day. So lots of complaints about back problems.
Mm.
So again, simple situation where if we can come in and the product is brought up at waist height, that is an example, you're not bending over. If you have the destination, meaning the pallet for the distribution center on adjustable height levels, again, you avoid having to bend over to fill those things up. And again, we saw a dramatic reduction in back issues and back complaints. Now it's
Interesting.
hard to put an ROI on that.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I was going to say was, being kind of a newer product to market. I've had the experience as an entrepreneur also of how do you establish your credibility? You can do the work, but how do you get this company to trust you because you haven't worked with somebody to that level yet? So in your space, a case study, when you're bringing new technology, it's great to say, hey, we saved XYZ company, whatever, 20%, whatever in lost time, or we increased their profits, et cetera. These are things that take time to play out, right? Like back
Yeah.
issues don't just develop overnight. And so that I was going to ask you, like, do you have some concrete examples? It sounds like you do have one that showed pretty quick results.
Yeah, great question because, given my background, everything is based on return on investment, right? And
Right.
so I spent a lot of time as we were going out to customers, return on investment, because it's quite substantial. And the reason for that is, MSD injuries is actually the number one cause of injury in the US. When you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, again, strains, sprains, number one cause of injury for multiple years in a row. And the cost is very high. The average cost is 35,000. And it's a cumulative injury that happens over time. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's cumulative unwind, meaning it takes years to unwind that, either through physical therapy, surgery, chiropractor, things of that nature. So
Yep.
it's very costly. So the ROI is quite exceptional. And the number of incidents are very high. And so the challenge is it's very easy to put an ROI on the reduction in incidents. It's not as easy to put an ROI on I went out and did 300 assessments, and they were all high priority, and I was able to reduce all of those from high priorities to low priorities, right?
Hmm.
And again, that's because it's cumulative. It takes time for that to filter through to see a reduction in incident rates where you can
Right.
actually put an ROI on that.
Right. Yeah. So it would take some time to have that accumulation. But then also, I would think that once you started to use this software, um, your operation is going to change from time to time. You're going to set up different machines. You're going to be running different parts. You're going to have different workstations. So, is there a vision for the chief safety officer inside of a company to actually have this on their phone, and then whenever things change or they see a new worker doing a new activity, they can analyze that specific activity?
Yeah, you got to remember, as you said, everything changes, meaning you might have designed a specific line to look and feel a certain way. And as soon as it gets out to the factory floor, built on the factory floor, it does change in some cases very quickly. And then so does your personnel. You've got churn of your personnel and changes. And so you might have a 6'5" male and a 5-foot male. Again, both working on the same line. So you might have to think about, how do I redesign portions of the line to work for different types of people?
Hmm.
So again, it's always something that's constantly changing. Second, you never get to the full population in a year. Typically, the way we see this working is maybe you get to 20% of your workforce each year where you're making changes. And it doesn't take as much time to do the assessments. It takes time to do that iterative process to get it to a point where it's going to work for the vast majority of the employees.
Right. So do they have to have a third party come in to do that assessment every time, or is that something that they're going to do in house?
They can do that in-house, and we help
Okay.
them. So the goal is you get the line manager, or you get the nurse on floor 9 who sees a challenge and takes a video and is going to take that back to her safety professional and say, hey, here's what I see. Can you help me understand how we can do this differently?
I see. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's a huge benefit.
Yeah. And
Um,
then sometimes those safety professionals don't know what the answer is, and that's when we get involved.
I
And
see.
we bring in our own professionals to help come up with those solutions.
Okay. So for right now, if someone wanted to get their hands on what you've created here and use it inside of their facility, do they go straight to you, or is it sort of a distribution model where you have these safety organizations that someone can work with?
They can do both. In
Okay.
many cases, and so larger organizations do farm out some of this work where they'll bring in independent boots on the ground that come in, and most of those organizations are used to using our products. Um, or yes, they can come direct to us, and we set them up. We've got a sales team, a customer satisfaction team, and again, a ergonomics team, and we're there to help, whether you're a small organization or a large organization.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, this is great that it's approachable for any size organization as well. Because I would imagine you have a lot more risks in smaller shops too, where you don't have as much structure around safety and things of that nature. Not because they don't want it, just because tight margins and you can't afford necessarily to have a CSO. Um,
We find
so
that a
yeah,
lot. Yeah, we
yeah,
find that, frankly, sometimes the smaller organizations do present the bigger challenges because they don't have full-time people um, that can go out and try to make these continuous changes, right?
yep,
And so that's our job, is to try to provide that service to them.
yep. What size what size development team, whatever AI engineers, developers, how many people does it take to like develop something like this?
Yeah, we're up to 15 people, and
Okay.
so it's not necessarily a matter of the historical assets or products that you see, but we are constantly coming up with new things that we're developing into the software. And it's primarily around how do we make this easy? So
Hmm.
right now, there's still some manual entry into the software. And we're constantly thinking, how do we automate this process
I see.
with the ability for manual override in the event that the AI is hallucinating? We want
Right.
to make it so it's manually overridden by somebody that's a trained expert that can actually go in and make those modifications.
Right. Okay. I wanted to hear a little bit more about your I guess you could say prior career. What's the most exciting kind of success story that you had in terms of mergers acquisitions?
Good question. If you look at my history, it was uh, very involved in the consolidation of the U.S. airline industry. So
Okay.
it was a time when the airline sector was in a challenge, and we had fairly significant unsecured credit positions where we ended up being the largest shareholders in a couple of different very large airlines, and drove the consolidation that you see today. Um, the approach that we took was very, very different, which was how do you allow teams, management teams, to build their empire, to be better competitors? And how do you build something? The airlines had a consistent history of going into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. How do
Hmm.
you make those entities stronger so that it's better for the employees and consistent for the employees? And so that was something that was a lot of people can read about and be entertained by.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a big project, and you're right. The airlines have been notoriously mismanaged. Um, so
Not as much since consolidation. They're significantly better jobs, right? And so
right.
part of that was a reduction in capacity. Part of that was allowing people to compete um, much more broader, and really kind of creating the big three, if you will, um, and stop this kind of micro competing. So it's the airline industry has been significantly better, with the exception of COVID,
Right.
since that consolidation.
With the exception of on flight snacks.
The consumer experience has not been any better. That's for
Right,
sure.
right, right. But at least they're not going out of business. No, that's pretty cool. Um, yeah, so I mean, very interesting history, and I'm sure bringing that kind of large corporate undertaking to now you being in a 15-man team has been a strange experience. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like that's got to be a little bit of a change for you.
Yeah, I think what I would say is even if you go back to my prior roles, where I had lots of capital to put to work, and you're surrounded by um, some of the brightest minds. When you join a startup, you are it's exactly the opposite, where you are burning cash, um, and you are trying to figure out how am I going to do as much as possible with a limited team. And
Right.
I think we could double our team, and we'd still be wondering how we're going to better utilize our resources. And what I mean by that is, how do I develop more product faster? How do
Hmm.
I how do I then concentrate on sales, go to market, meaning
Right.
how do I generate revenue faster?
Hmm.
And you have to have the right product first before you can really try to accelerate the revenue growth.
Right. So how far away are you from feeling 1,000% like let's generate revenue, let's go get the customer?
Yeah, the good news is we are, and we've got dramatic growth this year.
Great.
And but you're always sitting there looking at your product, saying, "I know we can do this better."
Right.
And we have some amazing things that are going to come up in the first quarter of 2026. Um, and sometimes you just can't wait until that happens.
Right. Yeah, and that's the way it is with software. I mean, You get your MVP out, and you you make
Yep.
continuous improvements, take customer feedback, and make it better. So no, that's really cool. What's kind of your main growth strategy right now? Like, are regardless of who you're going after, the strategy to get in front of those people, whether it's cold calling or whether
Yeah.
it's whatever. Like, how are you doing it?
The majority of our existing business is done direct to enterprise customers, and so those can be big and small. And how do you get to that market? It's primarily through conferences. So
Hmm.
for us, things like Applied Ergonomics Conference is our biggest focal point for us. Um, I only have a two-person sales team, so their jobs, they are doing outbound sales. We are, developing, just simple things like your website and meta tagging on the back end for SEO,
Hmm.
so that you can drive inbound. And again, if you're
Right.
trying to drive inbound, you've got to create content
Right.
that is going to go out on LinkedIn or on your website, in order to try to drive all eyeballs that eventually might come to you and say, "Hey, I heard you on this podcast, and I'd love to be able to have a conversation."
Right. Bring something familiar to the table so they can recognize what you're offering and then kind of frame your solution. And so what we typically do is, like looking at the blog article scenario, we're trying to generate traffic through SEO, is come up with just interesting questions that your target market would ask. And so, an example might be best method for patient transfer to avoid injury. Now, not everybody that Googles that is going to buy your product, but a percentage of those people will be the right people, and you can get in front of them. And just things like, how to do an ergonomic assessment in a machine shop, or really any type of specific use case, because I think in a lot of cases, that's what somebody in your target market would be looking for. So that's kind of how I think about it in terms of SEO, anyways. But yeah, so I really am impressed by the technology, really impressed by what you've brought to the table, and I think that there's an unbelievable amount of use cases. I mean, we talked about even using this in physical therapy, or in sports and things of that nature.
Yeah, there's no limit to what it can be used for. As any small business, you just have to decide what niche are you going to focus on first.
Yep.
And for us, we're not trying to delve into the sports market, and it would be a concentric circle that we would view as outside of our focus, at least currently. And so,
Right.
focused on ergonomics, we have a long ways to go, lots of development work left to do. Uh, the tool's always getting better. Again, it's always this balance between something that's really technical and something that's really usable by a generalist, and meeting that kind of in the middle, if you will. So lots of work to do on that front.
Yep. Well, it sounds like you're making good progress, and you've already got a good, a great offering for the market that's going to help a lot of people and prevent a lot of injuries. So, congratulations on leading a company that's on the cutting edge of technology and really solving some problems.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Shane. We'll talk
All right.
soon.
Cheers now.